Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I am honored to greet all of you. We're going to start a roundtable called Freedom to Publish and Decolonial Issues, Crossroads Between Asia and Latin America. So we're going to have a conversation between our comrades from the Philippines, Daniel Galea Zarzosa and Natalia Larcompino from Queculio Publisher House from Ecuador and Chile, Saed Usan from Pakistan, from Folio Books, and we hope that Kagai from Ethos Books and Singapore can join. And yes, so we're going to start now. I prepared a small text. It's going to be an introduction, and then I'm going to be asking you some questions that we will all answer collectively, and so we can have an exchange and have a dialogue and then have a more interactive discussion. So as I said before, this roundtable is going to tackle the freedom to publish and the colonial issues. When we talk about decolonialism in a formal and academic way, it's an observation that are usually done from a European and Western perspective. And they did not take into account the characteristics of the different societies and cultures. Cultures and societies that are also classified as inferior to hegemonic standards, because our references are always Western and European standards, so colonialist standards. So when we talk about colonization and coloniality are not the same thing. When we talk about colonization, we talk about the appropriation of a territory and the domination of a people. But when we talk about coloniality, on the other hand, we're talking about a way of thinking that reproduces the form and the ideologies of the colonizer. So when we are colonized, we remain subjected, perhaps no longer in terms of territory, but in terms of our thoughts are shaped by what the hegemonic colonial society imposes. So we can ask ourselves, do our cultural territories really belong to us? So there are some people that question this term of colonization and coloniality, at least in Latin America. I don't know what's the case in Asia, but in Latin America, some people say that since we have consciously incorporated these concepts and these cultural ideas that come from Europe, like, for example, the concept of human rights, we have consciously adopted them. We could say that we were not colonized, but that's something that can be discussed farther, for sure. What's true is that at some points of history, different groups, like, for example, with the Zapatista Army of National Liberation, when they approved the revolutionary law of women, when they enacted this law, they talk about human rights, but they question the things we adopted after the Spanish colonization. And so we can see that some practices have been imposed on us. And so we have this new coloniality and decoloniality at the same time. This is quite complex, but we're gonna focus this discussion on the book. We are cultural agents, even if we don't call ourselves that all the time, but we can ask ourselves whether with this publishing practice, we're part of the system of coloniality that leads us to want to reproduce, whether imposed or not, what is done by hegemonic cultures, or whether we've consciously distanced ourselves from it, from this coloniality. So, to start off, I'm going to ask you to briefly introduce yourselves, please. I'm going to be calling your names so that you can introduce yourselves briefly and you can tell us where you come from, what you do, and these things. So first of all, we could start with Fake Ura from Jantada Press, if that's okay. If you can tell us where you're based, what you do, so that we can get to know each other a bit better and we know what your ideas are. Thank you.
Thank you, Nayeli. Good evening from Manila in the Philippines. So I'm Faye Cura. I'm the publisher of Gantala Press. We're a feminist small press based in Quezon City in Metro Manila. And we were founded in 2015. We publish mostly political progressive books with communities of women. So our latest publications this year, now we're publishing a collection of Philippine writing and translation of Palestinian works. So yeah, we collected poems on Palestine, about Palestine, and also we translated some works from Palestine as an act of solidarity because we're also joining the call to boycott the Frankfurt Book Fair. And then we're launching next month, October, no, which is Peasant Month, a collection of poetry written by a peasant woman in Cavite in the Philippines. So those are the kinds of books that we publish. Nice to meet you all here.
Muchas gracias.
Thank
Bueno,
you
ahora
so
me
much.
gustaría que
Now
pudiesen
I'm
presentar
gonna give the
en caso
floor
Natalia
to
o Daniel,
Natalia
que
and
vienen
Daniel.
de
They
Chile,
come from Ecuador and Chile.
están aquí con nosotros.
And yeah, they're here with us. The floor is
Kikuyo
yours.
Editorial.
From Kikuyo Editorial, Publishing
Hola,
House.
qué gusto,
Hello.
muchas gracias por la invitación. Yo
Thank
soy
you so much for
Daniel,
having us.
eh,
My name is Daniel. My name is
perdón,
Natalia.
por Kikuyo.
We're part of the
a ver,
Kikuyo
lo
Publishing
que
House.
hemos
And
centrado, digamos, nuestra práctica entre
our main
nosotros mismos,
focus,
estamos conceptualizando, pensando un poco
where we work with
cómo
different
publicar algo y
concepts
cómo,
and we think about how to
cómo
build
los
a
libros,
good
digamos, se
catalog
pueden
of books
relacionar con ese
that
objeto.
readers are going to
Entonces,
engage with
intentamos
this
pensar entre la
object.
tríada
That's
texto,
the
imagen,
book.
objeto, ¿no?
So we
Libro
focus on the
y
book, the
arraigado
margin,
al
and the object,
territorio del cual
this triangle.
pertenecemos,
And it's all
podemos decirlo de
rooted
una
in
manera
our
más amplia, una
territory.
región
And we understand this
donde esta
from a
autoría
wide perspective
entonces
because we live in the
cómo
Andean
funciona. Tenemos un
mountain
taller
range.
tanto en Santiago de Chile
So we have a
como en
workshop in Santiago de
Quito.
Chile
Somos
and in
más personas, no
Quito,
somos solo
different
yo,
cities.
sino un
We're
colectivo más amplio que
composed
hace
of many more
funcionar
people. We are a big
esta
collective
expresión en ambas
and we work
territorialidades.
on this
Entonces,
in different territories and at different levels. And
los textos, las
we think
imágenes
about the
y
texts that we're going to be using, the
todo el
images,
objeto,
the graphics. We think
desde
about the
donde,
object
o sea, desde las prácticas, digamos, de pensamiento y
and the
estéticas
different
para
practices of
Entonces,
thinking, aesthetic of the community we belong to.
como introducción.
And I think that's it.
Gracias.
That's it. That's a brief introduction. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you
Bueno,
so
tenemos
much.
entonces también con nosotros
Okay, now we're gonna give the floor
Said
to
Hussein de Folio Books.
Syed
Quien
Hussein
nos
from
platicará
Folio Books from Pakistan.
quién eres,
Please, the floor is yours. Tell us who you are, what you do, and all this.
Thank you so much, Nelly, and good evening to everyone from Pakistan, and I think good morning to everyone in Latin America. Yeah, it's such a pleasure, such an honor to be part of this panel this year as well. We're Folio Books. We're based in Pakistan. We're split offices between Lahore and Karachi. And like Gandhala Press, we're also a progressive political publishing house, mainly focusing on hot political topics in the country. But we are also making this change as well, especially in the last, I would say, year and a half, similar to what Kukoya was saying about, no, not like art books, particularly, but, books on like architecture and also like radical practice as it pertains to building and especially ecosystems. Because in Pakistan, we're really suffering from this change of rapid development, and there isn't really something robust that's talking about it. So the market, that we're kind of aiming is, there's a lot of social media posts that are talking about this, but there's nothing robust from Pakistani academics and also activists themselves. And that's what we're really focusing on. Something else that we're focusing on is just in politics is event-specific politics, because there are a lot of like memoirs and a lot of like big event books that are present and done years down the line or later on, we're kind of focusing on more kind of rapid work by people who are on the ground and working right now. And our role that we feel right now as editors is to really kind of amplify that voice. This we're also not thinking in the sense that, okay, like this is a hot topic, it'll sell more books, but more so that this will be one kind of firm grounding, one kind of firm reference for someone who maybe in Pakistan, maybe globally, will be then picking up that topic later up. We've been around since 2018, so 7 good years, and looking forward to publishing more and more books and working with all of you.
Muy bien. Bueno, creo que no
Thank you so
está
much.
ni Tonatiu, ni
Okay, I think that
Kage y de
Gage is not
Singapur,
here.
así es que, bueno,
From Singapore, he's not here. So hopefully he can join later. Now here it's raining really, really heavily here in Mexico. There's a huge storm. So I hope they're okay. But yeah, let's move on.
Algo que podemos ver cuando, si usted, ojalá que puedan eventualmente revisar los catálogos de
I
cada
hope
una de
you
estas
can
editoriales,
review the
porque son
different
muy
catalogs
interesantes.
of all the publishing houses because they're
Efectivamente,
really
creo que una de las
interesting.
cosas
And I think
tienen,
that
en común, por lo menos
something that you all have in
las
common,
páginas, es que, como
as
bien
far as I've seen,
lo decían Daniel
is that, as Daniel and Natalia said before,
también la cuestión de la territorialidad.
you're all focusing on territories. You'll have this approach. As Saed said before, there are political issues and controversial issues about Pakistan, right? And or from the Philippines, they have a feminist approach. And if you review all the books that you have, you will see that you'll cover universal issues, but are also related to your territory, to your grassroots level. And that's really important because that speaks of what we could reflect on together, because we are cultural agents, as I said before, even if we don't always consider ourselves that. I think we can ask ourselves if whether from our publishing practice we are within the coloniality system, because sometimes we want to reproduce this, sometimes by imposition, sometimes because we want it, what is done by hegemonic societies. But other times we distance ourselves from it. And we are all independent publishers, and even if there's not an exact definition or a consensual definition to talk about independent publishing, we can consider that the projects that we have are projects that in the end are outside of the margins. And what we do is that we try to step away from these canons. So there are different questions now that we can answer collectively. The first one is, how do we see colonialism? And if we're still colonized? I would like to start with Daniel and Natalia. What do you think? You think we're still colonized? What is colonialism for you from your own perspective or from your space? How do you see it? What do you think?
Hola.
Hello.
Me parece compleja e
I think it's a
interesante
complex
pregunta
and
que
interesting
planteas.
question.
Voy a hablar más bien desde la misma práctica que
And I'm
llevo
going to talk about my
Eh,
personal
hay
perspective
que
and
dejar
practical
que
work.
siempre cuestionado
It's
como
something
comunidad
that
editorial,
we
vivimos, obvio,
often ask ourselves as
sido colonizados
as an
por
independent
hasta
publishing
ahí,
house.
que nos
We were
saltamos
colonized.
en
We are
cuanto
still
al
colonized.
territorio. Entonces creo
It's
que
something that still affects
nos hemos
us in our
cuestionado la
territory.
práctica que llevamos
And so we've of
adelante
course
y
thought
para poder,
about the
con ella
publishing
misma,
practice
ir
that we
pensándola,
carry
ir
out
sacando este objeto, cierto libro,
so that we
manera.
can
Y creo que ahí tenemos
approach
varios como
the book, the object that we talk about, in a different way. We have like different arms
el
that
proyecto
open up
que llevamos adelante.
in the project that we're working on now.
Uno de ellos, aparte de
One
ser
of them,
cuidadosas
in addition to being cautious and careful with what we publish, we publish critical essays by Latin American authors in the
intentamos que esos objetos
Indian
se
mountain
acerquen
range,
desde otra
Andean
materialidad.
mountain range.
Entonces es como
And we tried to give them a little different practicality, right? And try to think that there are different ways of reading. Because in the territory we live in, there were different ways of reading. Before the Spanish came here and colonized the space, there were different ways of reading. You know, they read the stars, they read the pottery, they read the fabrics, the textiles, all that. So we question ourselves this all the time, and as publishers, we work with the book, with this object. So how can we approach it in a different way? First of all, I think we do it with community practices. I think that's really important. Being able to share all the knowledge that we have with different communities, so that communities can create their own knowledge devices, we can call it. So you see all the projects here, and the communities empower themselves, and they think of this object and they think they're capable of becoming publishers, designers, artists, and so on and so forth. So this really helped us think about it with a different perspective. I think that in order to distance ourselves from colonial practices, we should think about this in a horizontal way, you know, that can be shared and exchanged. That's something we are often and continuously asking ourselves. How can we find different ways of reading?
Yo creo que
Yes, I think that
este librito que hicimos es
this
muy
booklet
sintético,
that
digamos,
we did
de lo que
really
pensamos y estamos
shows our way of
intentando
thinking
de la colonia que nos atraviesa y
and how
la práctica,
we approach
porque
all the colonial thoughts
cuando somos
that
chiquitos
have been imposed.
aquí
Because
en
when
primaria
we
nos
grew up
enseñan,
here
nos
in
cuentan una
primary
historia,
school,
nos cuentan una historia,
in
nos
primary
dicen,
school, they tell us a
cuando llegaron
story.
los españoles,
And they tell us that when the
me siento
Spaniards
mucho
came, I
todo,
was
o sea, nos cuentan la historia de estos dos.
we're in the classroom,
Cuando
we're
llegaron los
like
españoles,
7 or 8 years old. And when
trajeron a
the
Atahualpa,
when
le
the
pusieron una
Spaniards came,
Biblia y le dijeron a Atahualpa que era
they told
el
Tahualpa,
Inca de ese momento,
who was
la
the
parte de la
Inca
Amazonía.
king of
Le dijeron,
of
"Esta es
this
la Biblia,
area,
esta es la
they showed
palabra de
him the
Dios."
Bible and they said,
Entonces, el cura
these are the
Valverde le
words of
entrega la
God.
Biblia a Atahualpa,
So the priest gave the
le
Bible
dice
to
la Biblia,
Tahualpa,
Atahualpa se
the
la pone
book.
en el oído, y dice,
Tahualpa
"Esto
put
no
it
me
in
dice
the
nada."
ear and he
Y le
said,
tira
this
egipcio.
doesn't speak to me.
Entonces
And
los
then
españoles
throws
dijeron,
the Bible
no son
to the floor.
cristianos, hay
And
que colonizarlos.
Spaniards said, oh, they're
Entonces, el
not
libro
Christians. We
fue
need to
la
colonialize them.
excusa
So
de
the
la
book
colonización,
was just an
porque
excuse
no
to
accedimos
colonize our
a una
region
escritura y una
because we
lectura
did not
determinada,
have the
en un
access
formato
of this
determinado,
specific writing or reading
se
in this
tomó como
specific
esta excusa de
format.
la colonización, porque claro, ellos
So
tenían
that
que
was an
decirle al
excuse
rey
to
de
colonize us.
España,
Because, you
claro,
know,
estos
the
no
king
son
of
humanos,
Spain
no son
thought,
personas
oh, they're not
normales,
humans,
no,
they're
no
not human
siguen a
beings,
Dios,
they
no
can't
conocen a
read,
Dios.
they don't
Entonces,
understand
estos
God.
documentos, las
So they had to
crónicas,
justify
relatan esa historia, eso
themselves,
nos
right?
cuentan, ¿no?
And that's what the
Entonces,
story
al
tells us.
ser escritores,
And as writers, as
artistas,
authors,
editores,
as
narradores,
artists,
decíamos,
as
bueno, pues
publishers
si el libro fue una
in
ofrenda
the
tan
Andean
grande
region, we
como la
thought,
cruz,
okay, if the
¿por qué
book
hacemos libros?
was something really aggressive, like the
Entonces,
cross
esa
itself,
reflexión la
why do we
incluimos
work with
en
books?
este librito,
And
que también lo
that's the
convertimos
reflection that we
en
included in
mural,
this
también pegando
booklet.
distintos
It was
puntos
also a mural
del
that we
continente,
created in different parts of the
en el
continent.
que reflexionamos.
And
Y
here we
esa
reflected on
reflexión,
this.
lo
And
primero que quiere hacer
this
es
reflection
visibilizar el evento,
wants to
visibilizar
visibilize
y
the
ponernos ahí,
event,
decir,
right?
ok,
Give more visibility to what
revisar esta
happened.
contradicción, pero creo que es
And you know, coexist
colonial,
with this
decolonial,
contradiction.
colonial,
Coloniality,
anticolonial,
decolonial,
en fin,
anti-colonial. I think
nuestro
it's all
mensaje
related
es habitar
to
la contradicción.
coexisting with
Cuando estamos
contradiction.
cargo de esa contradicción,
We
no es
all
más que
live
encontramos una
within our
fuerza en esa
contradiction,
contradicción, es
and we
decir,
find
esto
power
no
in
es
that
solo esto,
contradiction,
ni esto
in the
otro,
mix,
sino un
right?
poco de esto,
I'm
poco de
not this
esto,
or
poco
that.
de
I'm a
esto.
little bit of this and a
Y esa
little bit of
quizá es
that.
nuestra forma de hacer
And I think that's the way we
la
work
mezcla,
with
¿no?
books.
Champurria,
This
como
mix,
dice
right?
la
The
Catrina,
champurria that we would say
chilena.
in Mapuche, in our indigenous language.
Eso creo que
So,
a grandes rasgos podríamos como
yeah,
responder.
that's how we could reply to this question. Thank you.
Muy interesante, ¿no? Y bueno, la historia de Ecuador y no tanto la de Chile, pero sobre
How
todo de Ecuador, me
interesting.
parece mucho
In
hacia
fact,
a la
the
cuestión
history
colonial
of
de
Ecuador
colonización mexicana,
is
¿no?
related and it's
Que
similar
tenemos
to
estas cosas
this
en común.
way
Pero
of
me gustaría saber ahora
colonization.
justamente desde el otro
And
lado del
I would
planeta,
like to
¿qué
travel
es lo
across
que
the world. I would like to go
en
to
este
the other
asunto?
side of the planet.
Sí, ¿qué es el
And
colonialismo? Y si
then
sí
I
y o
would
no
like to
seguimos
find out
colonizados,
about
particularmente en
colonialism,
los
and
países.
I would like to
Ay,
raise
perdón,
a
dije que,
question
¿verdad? Tendría que haber dicho sabemos.
concretely if we still
Así que,
feel colonized.
por favor,
I told
¿seguimos colonizados o siguen colonizados?
Kate
¿Qué
to be
es
next one, but
colonialidad para
I
ustedes?
think that I'm going to give the floor to the next colleagues.
¿Saed?
Sahe? Yes, it's your turn.
¿Por qué no me escucha?
Okay.
I
Yeah.
think,
Yeah.
yes,
Thank you,
Sahed.
Nate.
Yes,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No. That was I learned so much, I think, from Kikeo just like right now, just about the colonization, like of the book itself, because I think one thing that we see in South Asia particularly is that it's a very oral tradition, right? And then you also kind of think about, like besides that, like the animals speaking to you, the trees and the plants kind of speaking to you as well. But I think what happened in South Asia mainly was that because there were no written records per se, it kind of didn't matter to them, to colonists anymore, that, oh, if there's nothing written, this just means you're illiterate, which then means that your oral traditions also like don't really like mean much in the end, even though kind of like all the history of the land is like done like through song or like through folk songs or through etc. or like through just like speaking, essentially. I think when we grapple with the idea of colonization, like the number one thing is that we feel completely colonized. Like still, I'm an anthropologist by training, and like Mbembe, wrote like on the post-colony, I think like in 2003, like when his book came out. But really, even Pakistan today, we just see that like this is a continuation of the colonial project, because even all of our laws and jurisprudence are just based on British colonial law. Our foreigners acts, like large parts of our constitution, these are just completely based on what the British left us, and then our lawmakers have not really addressed this per se. What we grapple with the most is language. The main language that we're still publishing in is in English, and then we publish in Urdu. But that's also a safety of why we're publishing mainly in English and not in Urdu. The English market is much smaller in Pakistan. The Urdu market is much, much larger. But the thing is, it's dangerous to publish political works in Urdu, because then you have state repression come in, because that is a message that can come out to a lot more people than the message can come out in English. And so if it's in English, they think that like, oh, like the elite class is going to read this, or like the upper class is going to read this, and it doesn't really matter because they're not going to bring a revolution. We just had a fellow publisher in Peshawar called Dust on Books. They published a map that wasn't the official map of Pakistan, and then the owner was arrested, a staff member was arrested from their bookstore, their families were being harassed by police because they didn't print what the official current map of Pakistan is. And then, and it wasn't really any political work that was outside of any mainstream discourse that's happening in Pakistan or even globally right now, but like they still like got him because they published in Urdu, and like that's kind of like remains critical. But at the same time, Urdu is a major colonial language in Pakistan as well. English left by the British, but then Urdu is a very new language in the last kind of 200 to 300 years. The first Urdu novel comes out kind of in the middle of the 19th century, essentially. And Urdu is also the reason why Pakistan and Bangladesh split apart, because Pakistan was not willing to accept student leaders to the student movement from Bangladesh, and was also not accepting the Prime Minister, Mujibur Rahman, who had gotten the votes to become PM of Pakistan, because they would not accept a Bangla Prime Minister. And that's really how the country splits apart as well, because Bangla was not given the credence that Urdu and then English was also given in Pakistan itself. And so if you publish in Urdu, that's also continuing the colonial project, because then even regional major languages like Sindhi, Pashto, Baloch, Saraiki, all of those are suppressed. And then you have tons of local indigenous languages, which might have a small number in Pakistan is like 300,000 people. That's a tiny amount of people in Pakistan, but there are several languages that have as many speakers as those across multiple different languages, especially across the Kohistani or the mountainous languages, including Torwali, including Shena, including Gauri, including Khowar. which have speakers not just in their areas, but also in the major cities of Pakistan as well. And some of them have really picked up and gone national and international too. So then this is a question. I mean, if we publish in English, we're still colonial. If we publish in Urdu, we're still colonial. And if we publish in a very small kind of language, then comes also the issue, of who's going to buy this, because we have to be financially sustainable, financially viable, right? I mean, at the end, this is a major question for us. We're not applying for any grants because we want to be independent. We don't work with corporates particularly because we want to remain independent. But then if we publish a book for a market that has 200,000 speakers, what is the percentage that's going to also buy the book? And so then we're pushed back into being colonial, which is publishing in English, which is a safe political bet, not a big market. Publishing in Urdu, a much larger market, but our safety is then at risk. And then in smaller languages in which there's not a big market. So these are the questions and challenges that then we face amongst our questions of coloniality.
Interesante cómo la utilización de las diferentes lenguas tiene también
That's
significados
interesting to see the significance, the meaning that the use of different languages in this publishing world has. And for the fire, yes, I know that you are publishing this book, and I have a question for you because you were talking about the fact that sometimes we are subjugated by this colonialism and we accept it. And I know that the books are very powerful, and I would like to know the Philippines' perspective on colonialism and the fact that you may feel colonized.
So, yes, definitely, we still feel colonized. We are colonized. No? So, for those who may not know, the Philippines was colonized by Spain, like most of Latin America, for 300 years. No? And then during World War II, the Japanese Imperial Army also came and occupied the Philippines. And then the United States came to colonize us. So until now, we're under the United States control. So foreign businesses and foreign governments, they're the ones who benefit from our natural resources. No? So the Philippines is a rich country. It's a rich agricultural country with many minerals, etc., and all of this riches, no, in land and in water, but it's foreign governments and foreign corporations that benefit from them. So the US government, along with our own government, they work hand in hand in trying to suppress any dissent. No, so that's why they harass activists, including farmers. They kill activists also. They arrest and imprison activists or anyone who expresses dissent or anyone who tries to protest. So that's part of a long history of counter of the the United States counterinsurgency program here in the Philippines. So we're very much colonized. We're very much under imperialist powers. No, so and that's what we try to counter and fight in our publishing work. Just to illustrate further, no, our colonial mentality. So of course, the issue on Palestine is a hot issue, no, at the moment, and the Philippines is guest of honor at the Frankfurt Book Fair. So when the publishers for Palestine called for a boycott of the Frankfurt Book Fair for its complicity in the genocide, of course, the Philippine government or the Philippine contingent, no, they did not heed the call to boycott. No, so if you compare this to other countries in Southeast Asia, for example, Indonesia and Malaysia, that boycotted the Frankfurt Book Fair as countries, it's really sad. It's really sad. So I think that also illustrates how we're still entrenched in that colonial mentality where we the goal is to sell our books abroad to an international audience. And of course, there's also the deeper issue of the Philippines being close allies of the United States and Israel. And like the Philippines, we're one of the first countries to support the partition of Israel and Palestine. So and we also have lots of projects with Israel and the United States here. So just recently, there was a series of military exercises here in the Philippines using Israel arms and United States weapons at the expense, of course, of the Philippines' natural environment and also the social cost of having U.S. soldiers practice their weapons and their bombs, their ships in our waters. No, so yeah, unfortunately, we're very much still colonized.
Bueno, vamos viendo que también desde las editoriales podemos tener una
So we are
posición
witnessing
política,
how we
no
publishers
renuncia a esa
can have a position, a political
Y me gustaría ahora
position
hacer algunas
to abolish
preguntas.
this
Bueno, voy a hacer varias
colonization.
preguntas, pero igual se las
I'm going to
hacemos.
raise
Y una de las
different
primeras preguntas,
questions,
porque
and
justamente
I
pues
will
también
start
uno de los
with
títulos
a
es Libertad
concrete
de
one.
editar, ¿no?
Let's
Entonces
say
la
that one
pregunta
of the
sería, ¿qué
titles
opinas
of the
por ahí?
book
Bueno,
was
ya se hicieron
Freedom
algunas como
to
mencioné,
publish.
algunas ya
And I
sabemos
know
qué.
that this
La pregunta sería,
topic
¿qué
has
tanta
triggered different
libertad
questions. So
tenemos
I
como
would like
poder
to know to what
independiente para
extent
publicar lo
we
que
are
deseamos publicar,
free
lo que deseamos
as
publicar?
independent
Y si
publishers
cuando
to publish.
publicamos nos estamos
In
alejando
case we publish,
conscientemente
are
de las
we
ideas que parecen
um,
haber sido impuestas por a nuestra sociedad, por sociedades hegemónicas,
trying
digamos.
to
Y la otra pregunta, bueno,
escape
ahora
from
otra
these
pregunta más sería si
colonialist
somos libres
societies?
realmente
And
cuando tomamos
also,
esas
are
decisiones
we
de
free
publicación o
if
si
we
hacemos
make all
censura
these
o nos
decisions
hacemos
related
autocensura
to
o
publishing?
si
Are
ejercemos
we
nosotros la censura.
censoring ourselves
Las
or
cuestiones
are we
políticas
victims
en los
of
tres países aquí
censorship?
presentes, bueno, cuatro
We
países
have four
presentes,
countries
son muy diferentes,
present
pero
in this meeting, and I
tenemos
know
realmente
that
libertad,
positions
somos libres
may
en publicar lo que
vary,
queremos,
but I
ejercemos
would like to know
autocensura
if
o nos
we are really
nos
free when we
alejamos conscientemente de esas
publish.
prácticas
Are
hegemónicas.
we
Entonces, me
consciously
gustaría que ahora
escaping from
comenzara,
these
por favor, Sahel.
colonialist practices? And now the floor is for Sahel.
Thank you, Naeli. I think it's a very interesting question of like the self-censoring one, right? I mean, I think when we choose to publish, when we choose not to publish in Urdu and we choose to publish in English, I think that's the biggest self-censorship that we have, because that really is a protection thing. And the thing is that, like, I mean, not for lots, but like for a couple of our English books, we have gotten a lot of hate in which like we have been harassed essentially of like shutting down the publishing house and then having like people like be outside our office and asking, what are you doing exactly? So that's the biggest sense of self-censorship, in which we're not translating work into Urdu extremely fast. But the other side of that also is that, like, because of state repression, there are not many translators left to translate from English to Urdu in the first place. And with the notes that we had in the Google Doc before this talk, from Singapore, I think it was that a lot of Singaporeans choose to publish in the West. And that's because, you know, it's like better money, it's better recognition, much more global. In Pakistan, it's a very similar thing. But what mainly happened in Pakistan in the 1980s was when Ziaul Haq, the dictator with the longest time period in Pakistan and the most repressive per se, during his time, universities suffered massively. And I mean, we're a progressive press, but we publish mainly academic work and we get the Pakistan rights for lots of like work which is done in Pakistan or South Asia, and then publish it locally so it's cheaper for nationally essentially. In the 1980s, a lot of Pakistani intellectuals left Pakistan. And when they left Pakistan, they settled in like the UK, they settled in Beirut, they settled in Europe. And with them, took their ideas and took their writings and then started publishing them over there. And so you have this lacuna from the 80s, 90s till the late 2000s. Is literally till the 2000s we had this dictatorship, after which then you can have new publishers, you can have new publishing coming out. But it's entered at a time when the world is in a global financial recession, and then Pakistan itself is suffering massively economically. And so with even just simple things like import bans, then you can't really have good quality paper that's coming in. And how do you make an attractive product in the end as well? I mean, like that's almost a form of censorship as well, of like choosing which kind of paper to get, just because of the financing that you have. But going back to the 80s, because of Zia and because of state repression, you have so many intellectuals leaving the country. That tradition of publishing your book outside Pakistan, that just remained. And so, first of all, it was really a safety thing. But then secondly, fast forward to today, it's much more of a financial thing. And because Pakistani publishers have kind of lost their networks of global distribution, it becomes tougher that if I were a Pakistani academic and I teach in the West, then I kind of think that I might as well just publish outside because that's a much broader market. It will go to all the Western universities. And in Pakistan, my audience might A, be very low, and then A, the book might get banned as well. So then that's another thing that happens. So the self-censorship, I mean, comes like from the Urdu per se, in which we choose to publish in English. But then it's also because it's so difficult to find high quality translators who can translate from English to Urdu. So it becomes a bit of both in the end.
Muy interesante. Además, hace rato
How
llamabas la
interesting.
atención
And
justamente de quitar lo que
in
comentabas, ¿no?
the
Que se
case
ha
of
perdido mucho
Pakistan,
también
you
la
were
educación tradicional,
describing that
los deberíamos de
oral
pensar si también esa
traditions
pérdida, bueno, no, esa
were
pérdida finalmente también es causa del
forgotten,
colonialismo,
and
¿no?
maybe this loss is a
Y también
cost by colonialism,
obviamente los desplazamientos
and
de actores
also
políticos,
the
económicos,
displacement of
etcétera, de
people
población hacia otros
due
países, pues eso
to
también que se pierde una tradición, que
economic
se
or
desconectan esas
social
tradiciones y
matters.
entonces nos veamos,
In exchange,
tengamos como
we
necesidad
know
pues
that
publicar lo que
some
quieren
links are
leer los
lost,
otros y no lo que
and
queremos leer nosotros.
sometimes we have to
Bueno, ahora
publish
le
what
preguntaré
people
entonces
would
a
like to have and not what we would like
un
to
autor es
publish.
Cargay. A
And so
Feikura,
I'm going
yo quiero
to
que esté
ask
Feikura para que
Feikura,
nos
but I would like
platique, pero no,
Kai
pues,
to be
frase.
here,
A
but
Feikura que nos platique un
our
poquito
colleague is not.
justamente esto,
And
¿no?
I would
¿Qué
like
tanta
to,
censura hay?
I would like
Y
Kai
si estamos o no autocensurando.
Hikuyu, sorry, to
Ya les
answer
preguntaba.
to these questions that I had previously raised.
Que si
Are we
tenemos libertad para
censoring
publicar, ¿no?
ourselves?
Básicamente,
Are
en
we
realidad.
free enough to publish? What do you think?
Ahí.
Is it me? Me? No? Yeah. So I think that as long as we're like economically disempowered, we can't really publish with complete freedom. So having limited resources forces us to prioritize what to publish. No, so this leads to the silencing or like pushing aside of other stories. No, because we have limited resources. In terms of censorship in the Philippines, as I mentioned, we're very careful to publish books about the revolution, for example, about the ongoing civil war here in the Philippines between the armed fighters, the revolutionary fighters, and the government. No, so we can't really publish anything about that because the government will tag us as communist and therefore terrorists. So and that's dangerous for us, not for activists. So, but at the same time, I think that publishing under constraints, no, whether these are economic or political constraints, they also make our work more meaningful, no, because we get to rely on our communities to be able to do our work. We become more skillful in troubleshooting or in like trying to look for solutions to our problems. We become more creative and more resourceful. So yeah, so it's okay. We may not be completely like free, ganyan, but we have our community around us, no, helping us also navigate these constraints. Of course, no, the vision is um to achieve that kind of society where anyone, like literally anyone, can make and read a book in complete freedom. So
Muy interesante, ¿no? Esa cuestión de tener que
Very
ser cauteloso
interesting
y tener
indeed.
que cuidar mucho porque para evitar que inclusive el
It's
gobierno te
true that
califique.
you have to be
Y yo diría,
extremely
pues sobre todo porque
careful in
somos
order
valientes, ¿no?
to
Porque
avoid
finalmente,
that the government
pues como
set
que
the
hay
eyes on
cuestiones
you.
particularmente feministas,
And
pues
also, when it comes
tienes que
to
tener, o sea, sí,
feminist
mucha
related
valentía finalmente
matters,
para
we have to be
poder,
very bold.
hacerlo.
We have to
Entonces,
be
veo, por lo
extremely
menos lo que yo
audacious
pude
and
leer, o sea,
courageous.
su catálogo
I've been reading
las
your
redes,
catalog
es que están
on the
haciendo
social
cosas muy
media, and
interesantes
I've seen
que permiten
that you
justamente
are
esa apertura
carrying
del
out
pensamiento. Y creo que una
interesting
cosa
tasks
que ha estado
in order
presente
to
en estos, lo
open
que
the
ustedes han
minds of
platicado,
readers.
es muy
And I
importante la
think
cuestión de
that
la
it's very
la
important
comunidad
to
creo que es algo
rely
que
on
nos impele
community. The
a seguir
community is a very relevant
investigando
issue
y editar
because
también lo que
community
queremos, a pesar de que, como
is
vemos en algunos lados, es mucho
urging
más
us
complicado que
to
en otros países.
publish.
Bueno,
We
y
do
ahora me
know that
gustaría
publishing in
Daniel y
some
Natalia nos
countries is
contaran
more
cuál es la situación
difficult than in
tanto en
others.
Chile
And
como en
now I would
Ecuador,
like
en términos
Daniela
de qué
and
tanto
Natalia
nos sentimos
to
latifundizados, estamos
describe the
publicando lo que
situation
queremos,
in
hay
Ecuador.
censura, hay autocensura.
Do you think there is a
Em,
censorship,
bueno, creo que nuestra
self-censorship?
realidad es bastante
I think
diferente
that our
a la que
reality
les
is
ponen las y los compañeros.
totally different compared to the
Capaz
ones
que
our colleagues are experiencing.
el mercado ecuatoriano y chileno está
In
alineado
Chile and
de
Ecuador,
alguna manera
the
con el
markets
capitalismo
are
global.
linked
En
to
cambio,
global
digamos,
capitalism.
la disyuntiva o digamos el tema polémico que
And
podríamos plantear
so
es a la inversa, digamos, las cosas que
we
publicamos
could
están de
think the
moda,
way
son cool.
around. The
Entonces,
books we publish
yo creo que es
are
otra forma
cool, are
de
trendy,
cooptación y de,
and
digamos, de vaciamiento
so
de los
we can
discursos y de
attract
vaciamiento y de estigmatización de
readers.
la lucha,
We can
digamos, que
make
se caracteriza
our
estas ideas
fight visible
de lo cool, de lo que está de moda, de estas cosas que se
because
venden, de estas cosas que
yeah,
claro,
books are sold,
venden.
books are fashionable.
Entonces, en ese sentido, claro, hay contradicciones fuertes dentro de
So
todo, ¿no?
there is a
Como
high
el rol
contradiction,
de este caso
as we were
del año
mentioning
pasado, hace 2 años,
earlier. I think,
publicamos
if I'm not wrong, 2 years ago,
Carol Noroña es una
we
periodista de acá de
published a
Ecuador,
book,
que
and
ella lo que
there
hizo
is an
fue
Ecuadorian
relatando
journalist
cómo
called
el Ecuador se
Carol
fue convirtiendo en
Lodoña,
un
and
narcoestado,
she
¿no?
described how
Fue
Ecuador
retratando, digamos, cómo fue que
became
ese suceso
a
entró a
state
exiliarse del país porque
where
estuvo perseguida, estuvo amenazas de
drugs were
muerte,
present, and then she
pasó por una
had
escena
to
muy caótica, muy fea.
go
Esto
into
pues un poco
exile
recopila
because
todas
she
esas
was
crónicas,
threatened.
todas esas
So we
historias
published
que
a
son en
book
realidad la
that
radiografía de lo que
compiles
sucedió en
all
Ecuador
these stories.
con el narcoestado, que es
Eh,
nuestra realidad actual.
And this is a
Bueno,
reality.
lanzamos
We
ese
are
libro
living nowadays. And I remember
solicitamos
that at Quito's book fair,
resguardo policial
we
para
had to
proteger la
be
integridad física del lugar, ¿no?
protected by police because we wanted
Tuvimos todo
to
un
preserve
imperativo
the physical integrity of
para ese
Carol at all
resguardo,
times.
un despliegue policial, digamos, un poco quizá demasiado grande, pero está la contradicción, digamos, de que estamos haciendo un libro que
And so,
visibiliza lo que es el estado
to some
actual
extent, we are incurring in a contradiction because we are
construcción
making
sobre la base de vida
our
humana
reality
como
more
materializada,
visible.
¿no?
We are trying to
Y en
understand
algunos países
how
estados
life
lo están
works,
resguardando
but at the same
a
time,
esa persona, ¿no? Entonces,
our state is not
y fue nuestra contradicción
protecting
de
this
repente
person.
tener que estar hablando con los
So
altos mandos
I
de
remember
policía
that we had
porque,
to talk
¿no?
to
Cosas que nunca
the
nos hubiésemos
police
imaginado.
forces, the high ranks
Claro,
of
ciertas
the
sensibilidades,
forces of
ciertas
police.
vidas y lugares
But at the
de
same
mucha
time,
gente
we
que de
had
pronto
to
quizás convivió
reflect on
con gente adecuada.
the sensitivity, the fragility of
Entonces,
lives. And
nada, creo que
so
es una fibra más para
I think
insistir, digamos,
that
en la contradicción que habitamos,
we
que
should
estamos, ¿no?
insist on the
Y
contradiction
que
we are
es
experiencing,
diferente, digamos,
which is
porque
different
sí sentimos
compared to
la
other
capacidad
realities
de
because we
publicar,
do feel
que
free
publicamos lo que
to
queremos,
publish. We can publish
pero,
what we would like
pero es
to,
una
but at the
libertad
same time,
que no sé si se basa, digamos,
this
en la
freedom
no
is
censura del
somehow
Estado,
based
sino más bien
on
el esfuerzo de la pregunta. Es
the
cómo cuido
absence of
a una comunidad, cómo
censorship of
cuido una
state,
lucha,
or rather,
cómo cuido a una
how I
persona.
take care of a
Entonces no es
person,
cómo me
of
cuido
a fight.
del
It's
poder, sino
not
cómo cuido
how I
a quienes no
protect
tienen poder,
myself
por así decirlo, si
uh,
podríamos llamarlo.
from the
Eh,
authorities, from the
Sí,
state.
de acuerdo. Creo que va justamente por ahí y quizás eso nos hace tomar como ciertas decisiones a las autoras,
Yeah, that
autores que
makes us
publicamos,
make different decisions.
ya que podemos publicar en esa libertad,
Since we can
no sé,
publish
quizás
with freedom,
poner sobre la mesa otras lenguas,
then we should put on the table,
otras
for
perspectivas,
example, the topic of different
buscar como
languages or
sí,
different
eso,
perspectives that
otras
don't
formas
really
de
have a
ver la
voice.
colonización en general.
But yeah, I think this is really complex and our situation is different to the one
Cierto,
that our
interesante,
comrades
¿no? Creo que esta
mentioned.
es la realidad de varios,
Yeah, this is really
no
interesting.
de todos, pero sí de los
It's the
países
reality
latinoamericanos, ¿no?
of
Que
most
podemos
countries
estar
in
dando
Latin
voces
America. You
contra
know,
el poder, pero
sometimes
al mismo tiempo,
we
como bien lo dicen ustedes,
we
¿no?
talk
Tenemos la
about the
intención del mismo
freedom,
poder
but we
contra
have
el poder.
contradictions
Entonces,
because the power
y entonces piensan,
is
no,
there.
es
It's
México
imposed
y
on us.
México, y más bien no es
So we
tanto
think,
cómo
okay, what should I
podamos, porque si
publish?
vamos,
What should
cómo
I
vamos a
not
responder o
publish?
qué vamos a pedirle a
It's
los otros,
mostly
¿no?
about how we're
Por
gonna
eso
respond to it
precisamente
and what we're
pero ya
gonna
se incorporó
ask from the others.
desde Singapur.
Okay, so
Desde Singapur.
Kage just joined
por
us
ejemplo, ahora
from
que
Singapore.
contase,
So I would like
que nos
for him
contase
to
rápidamente de
tell
esto,
us a
que nos
little bit
contara
about
rápidamente
himself,
cómo
Ethos
viven
book as
ellos
well,
la
and
colonialidad.
how
Y si
they
hay libertad,
they experience
si hay
autocensura
autocensura en su
and
forma de
if
publicar.
there's freedom
Y
or if
primero que nos
there's
digas
censorship
qué
in
tipo
the
de libros
way
haces y
you
un
publish.
poquito
But
sobre
also
eso.
tell us a little bit
Un
about
minuto para
yourself and
incorporarte a la
about the kind
plática.
of books that you publish and all that. The floor is yours.
So sorry about being extremely untimely. I have mixed up the time, so yeah, and I see familiar faces here. Faye from Gantala, hello Faye, and I can't see everybody because my screen is not configured that well. But really happy to be on this panel with fellow publishers. I think the question about how we experience colonial kind of pressures, right? I have missed out so much of what maybe my fellow publishers have mentioned. In Singapore, I think we are very much steeped in British history. Our examinations at various levels, a large part of our population, we are schooled in British style kind of curriculum. So when we are brought up, we learn the language of our former colonial masters. And the prestigious institutions, our ruling government, they are all carrying the imprint of the British past. So there is that level of symbolic prestige. And in real terms, it is an access and power that colonial levers provide. So in a sense, when even in today, just within the academic publishing world, I'm from the independent publishing world, but when I observe academic presses, the academics, they are privileged when they do work that are more so-called international. So there's very little local data sometimes. And that, of course, then means that our writers, our publishers, we don't get too much raw data that is produced by the academics, except for the special few. And they are such precious resources. I think all of us know when you have academics who are so invested in your own history, in your own like systems, their thinking really is the root of your own culture. Yeah, so I forgot to introduce myself, but you can see that yeah, we are all quite passionate about what we do, right? So we launch right into talking about what we care for. So Ethos Books, we were started about 30 years ago. 1997 was the first three poetry books that we published. I believe that our roots are steeped in the desire to tell our own story. So Singapore recently celebrated its 60th birthday, and this is its own founding in 1965. But again, this concept of history is also a colonial kind of influence, because the concept of independence from 1965, it was a post-colonial bookmark as well. So I would say that in terms of even how the nation tells its story, there's a mainstream kind of perspective. And for Ethos Books, when we publish fiction, non-fiction, when we publish voices that tell of other versions, it is part of this attempt to recover a longer history, a more alternative history, to that being told by our textbooks, official textbooks. Yeah. So I think just a very condensed reply. I hope that gives you some insight into what Ethos does. In terms of censorship, last year we had also a very wonderful discussion in the same book fair. So censorship in Singapore is real in the sense that it has become so internalized that authors are typically thinking about self-censorship. So we have this again. We have a few writers who are getting to think out of the boxes, writing out of the boxes. So I think censorship is so prevalent that it has become part of how we think. So I think that is probably even more effective than outright guidelines. Yeah. So one very direct way that censorship is working is that our funding, when it's given, there are guidelines on what you should not write about. Yeah. So for example, race and religion, typically if you have books that are published in these areas, if you submit it for funding, it probably will not be accepted for funding. So yeah, I think that's a short one. I would really love to hear what the rest have to say. Yeah.
Muchas gracias, Kai.
Thank you very, very much, Ka.
Como vemos, cuando hablamos
So,
de la autocensura, de
when
la
we talk
censura, de las
about
condiciones
self-censorship and
políticas,
censorship and the political context, the economic context and background, and when we talk about identity as well, when we lack the communication, for example, between the indigenous languages in our countries where we use the colonial language, maybe this is more internalized in Latin America. Because, yes, as Ka mentioned before, independence is really recent. And in Mexico, we just celebrated our 215-year anniversary of independence. We believe that Spanish is a mother tongue. But in Mexico, there are at least 68 indigenous languages that are still widely spread and spoken. And many of them are quite big in terms of speakers. And this happens in Ecuador and many other countries. So what we see is that somehow when we talk about censorship or self-censorship, coloniality is not always imposed by colonialist countries, but also it's present in the countries that have been colonized. And this coloniality is imposed by the ruling groups, the powerful groups, as we talked about before. They are imposing this ideology to those, on those that are inferior to them. For example, what they mentioned about not writing in Urdu, right, but writing in English and all that. So the question now would be, as publishers, if we want to do so, how can we fight against this coloniality? Or do we want to fight against this coloniality? I think we already answered this because it's about the self-censorship we impose on ourselves. But can we turn the book into a tool of colonialism, decolonialism, sorry? Or should the book be decolonized? And I would like to start with Kikuyo to see what they have to, what they have to share with us.
Chuta, está difícil.
Thank
A
you.
ver,
No entiendo.
no, o sea, lo que pienso es...
Okay, so I think that
no, o sea, quizá una de las formas que hemos encontrado
maybe something we've noticed.
Es que, claro, es complejo.
Okay, it's a
Como
very
cómo
complex question.
haces para que
But
el libro
how can
no
we make
siga
sure
aportando
that the
a una
book
misma idea de poder,
does not
digamos, desde el
contribute to the
cuerpo y una misma
same
idea de
idea of
relacionación,
power and
pero al
social
mismo tiempo cómo haces
relationships?
para
How do we manage to
no
do it
folclorizar las alternativas,
and
no
not
folclorizar eso y
make
convertirlo en
the
un idioma aplicable,
alternatives
por
a
ejemplo. Entonces,
folklore thing, right?
creo que
And
una
commodify them.
solución a lo
So I
que
think
hemos logrado tiene que
the
ver
solution
con
that we're thinking of
la colaboración, digamos, que las mismas
is
comunidades generen
through
ideas nuevas,
cooperation, so that
un
communities
acompañamiento de
produce their own
parte tanto
books,
una
we
persona
accompany
como la
them,
autora, el
or we
autor,
support them. We support the writer, the
que
author,
vienen directamente, digamos, del seno de estas críticas o del
you know,
seno de
they
estas
come
luchas, ¿no?
from
antes
the
de
roots of the
actuar
struggle.
como
So
editores en este
before we work
escenario
as
tan
publishers in the
yo
traditional sense of the
elevado,
word,
voy a
you know, as this
decir esto así,
person
que
that's
eso
going to
está
say,
bien, esto está
okay,
mal,
this is right, this
esto
is wrong,
modifiquémoslo así para
we
los
could
fines del
change this,
mercado,
we could shape
más
this
bien se
differently for the
entiende en
market.
términos,
I
digamos,
think
colaborativos,
we can
acompañamiento,
work
que sí,
through
bueno, hay un saber
cooperations
en
and
términos
accompaniment.
del
So, okay,
quehacer
let's work
editorial y de
together.
diseño,
Let's
de
see how we can do
dirección,
it, and then
de
work
todo, desde
with the
la
design,
impresión,
understanding the
impresión y el
object,
equipo de
how we're gonna
limpieza,
bind the book
etcétera.
together, and
Entonces,
understand the
cómo
language
armar
and
ese
all this.
diálogo para
So,
con
yeah, we can have this dialogue
comunidades y autoras que pues
with
han
communities and
escuchar.
writers
En ese
that
sentido,
embody the
es
struggles
la respuesta que les
themselves,
planteamos al
right?
inicio.
So
El libro es
it's the same reflection we
es un
shared
objeto
at the
colonial,
beginning.
digamos,
The book is a colonial
es el
object.
triunfo de un tipo de
It's the
escritura, es el
triumph,
triunfo de un
it's
tipo
the
de escritura,
success of a
es el triunfo de un
specific
tipo
kind of
de
writing,
codificación,
reading,
estamos diciendo.
codification, signs, and symbols.
Y bueno,
And
cómo utilizarlo, o sea,
yeah,
adentrarnos en él
the
para
thing is,
intentar,
how can we
pues a partir de
try
eso
and
generar,
make it,
a veces decimos,
I
sí,
don't know,
como que hacer una
sometimes we
relación
say
cognitiva con el libro, una relación
that there's a
empírica con el libro.
cognitive
A veces
relationship with the
también
book,
decimos,
but we
el
also
libro
say
es la
that
excusa. Es
the
la
book
excusa
was the
para
excuse,
juntarnos, es la excusa
the excuse to come
para ver mal
together,
las cosas que están mal, es la
to criticize the things that are wrong, to think collectively. And if we think of the book as that, as the excuse that we have to do things together, positive things, then that's how we can move away from colonialism, maybe. Yes, I was also thinking about what we said before at the beginning. All the objects that we create are different when it comes to format, how they are materialized, and all this. So little by little, we want to provide different alternatives of reading. I don't know, we can have a map or a map, embroidery, I don't know, different formats. We also have handicraft production. So it's like a mixed production type. And we try for our practice to be articulated or organized differently. We don't want to impose anything on writers, but we have dialogues. We prioritize care and yeah, I think that's the main thing when we think about the book as an object. We can think of the book from different perspectives. There are also a bit more sensitive. I think that's important as well. The book should encourage us to think differently and to read from different perspectives. Yeah, maybe there's like a little fight between the rational centrism, right? The book as this intellectual object, international object. Yeah, we reflect on this often. We use this term, and it's to think with the hands. So the thing is, how can we make the book thought-provoking, right? And make us think with the hands, with our stomach, with our lungs, with other people. I think so yeah, maybe the book is a way of making this rational centrism crumble, maybe. But it's definitely not the solution. I don't know the solution, obviously. This is very interesting. And now, Ka, maybe you can share with us what you think. Is the book a potential decolonial object? I don't know. What do you think about it from Singapore?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of even the printer, right? One of the most outstanding printers. The brand is Heidelberg, which is from Germany. I mean, so sometimes I'm not sure. Even the language I'm speaking now, it is not the language that originates with the presumed race that I am of, which is Chinese, and I'm from China. My ancestors are there, so I feel that there comes a point where we need to recontextualize the object that we inherit, and that will allow us to then, in a way, reclaim the object as well. So I think I'm thinking how we can avoid a purist kind of a concept of an object, because it might be impossible to go back to what is properly original. And the book, in that way, becomes a creative canvas as well. I think when we deconstruct knowledge, we also have to build knowledge at the same time, because we don't really want to create a vacuum. So my own thinking is the whole publishing project at Ethos is really about how do you use and repurpose the language that you sort of inherit, even if it's not of your original forebears? How do you use and repurpose the language to tell stories that are forgotten? Because then the book, the form, then it becomes a container for the spirit that you're trying to remember. So I think that's how we are thinking about it. But I love that we are grappling and struggling, right? Because that's not so straightforward. Yeah, I'm not sure if this invites like argument. I hope it does. So yeah, that's from me.
Muchas gracias, Kai.
Thank you
Bueno,
so much,
y
Kat.
Faye, ¿tú qué nos
And
puedes decir?
Faye, what can you tell us? What's your opinion on this?
Yeah, I think we should also decolonize the processes that surround the book, as an object. So we should also decolonize the context of book production. So, of course, now we've already established that the book is a tool of colonization, and it has been used like in the Philippines and in Latin America, like the Spaniards or the Spanish people, they used the Bible, to convert to convert us to Christianity, etc. And I sorry for going back to Frankfurt again, but I think the Frankfurt Book Fair is the biggest metaphor of how the book is being used to advance colonialist projects. So it's like Frankfurt is a space where Palestine is erased. Palestinians are not given the chance to, share also their own narratives and their own culture, their own history, their own books. So, for example, by boycotting Frankfurt Book Fair, we're able to decolonize, no? We're able to decolonize, the process of book production and distribution and reading also, and expressing solidarity with our fellow bookmakers and book creators. I very much agree with our colleagues in Kikuyo, when they said that we should be working with communities in producing books from communities themselves. I think that's a powerful way to decolonize also the book and the process of bookmaking. For publishers, we should be clear on why we're publishing, who we're making the books for. No, is it to, like, are we publishing so we can sell the book to foreign translators in Frankfurt for an international audience because that's where the money is, or are we publishing to for our local readers here? No, like I grew up reading works in translation. I was able to I mean, I enjoyed the first books I read were all in translation, no? Even if they're from Europe or from Japan or from Korea or other parts of the world. I was able to enjoy all of those books because they were translated uh, to Filipino, to my language, or to English even. So I think it would be great if we could also like do that to our you know for me, for my fellow Filipinos, if they could read um revolutionary or great literature in Filipino in a language that they understand. I think that would be a great contribution also. So yeah, we should be clear on who we're making the books for, and also uh, what language we should use, to go back to what Said has been mentioning earlier.
Muchas gracias. Isaed,
Thank
¿tú
you very
qué nos
much, Syed.
puedes decir?
You are on.
Yeah,
You have
thank
the
you,
floor.
Nelly. Yeah, yeah. I mean, like lots and lots of like great points. I mean, Kokoyo's given us like I think all of us in Asia like a lot to think about, and I'm really glad that like this session is both Latin America and Asia as well, because I think we're all learning a lot from each other right now. And I think when it comes to, like the kinds of different productions that we can do, because I mean, I think typically, right, like the book, give to a printer, you have particular grammage, the entire book is printed in that way. And the book is like done. You can put like photo inserts and stuff, but like using different kind of like materials and stuff. I mean, we've seen that in Pakistan, but and in South Asia more broadly. But ultimately, right, I think this comes as what Faye was talking about from Gantala, is that perhaps like true decolonization comes from financial freedom. And most of the projects that like I'm seeing right now in South Asia, they're all kind of funded projects that have a lot of money kind of given to them, and then even like reprints cost a lot. And then when it becomes then like, is it a financially viable object to put into market? Then like these kind of questions like abound, like as well of like what community we're giving. What I really really like about, and what Kokoyo is kind of like what I really learned from them, is like working with the community directly and then using that within the community. That's like one. Then how do you kind of like in like the business operations, like how do you like scale that in the end, right? Because then you get that kind of like, like forget like regional, like even like just like national market, to like really like invest itself in the book. And then it's not just the book alone, it's like several different mediums, right? Like it's TV, it's Netflix, it's Instagram, it's all these different mediums. But then, I mean, I think as publishers, we're kind of thinking about like the book being the the mode of colonization, and like the way like colonization was like okayed essentially. But like I mean, all of social media is being owned by these imperialist powers, which are just data mining in the end as well. And so do we, and that's really a conversation, because all of us as publishers are using social media to, attract like new audiences as well, and then attract them to like essentially to buy our books in the end. And so I think like that's kind of like what I was thinking of, like, yes, as publishers are publishing a book. And then also what kind of Faye said, which I thought was really beautiful, is that, the goal in the end is for everyone to be reading the book that they want to read. And that's just not a reality right now in Pakistan. And because it's not just that books are being censored, are being kidnapped by the state, which we've seen an example in the last like 2 weeks in Pakistan alone, right? And is a regular occurrence in of itself. So, I mean, and again, the question is also, I guess, so complex that like there's no like real answer. So I guess we can all just kind of like share our thoughts on this in the end.
If I may just follow on, I really am putting together all the different thoughts, right? And when Faye referred to Kikuyu and also the idea of decolonizing the process, that really got me to think of a way forward, because yeah, sometimes it seems like we don't have a way forward, and that's troubling. But I think a way forward is I do know that publishers like Gantala, they have been very successful in creating grassroots support for publication. So when you can sort of reshape the ecology of publishing, the process of publishing, it becomes a viable pathway that will create more momentum. So, for example, I think I am actually starting to see certain community support. People come sometimes to Ethos to say, hey, we want to contribute, volunteer for you. When people volunteer, they are stepping outside of the capitalist kind of market. They are earning from it, but they are putting their effort, goodwill into the community ecology. So I think that's a very viable pathway forward. So we can't be sort of detached from the like a machine, but we can siphon parts of the machine towards community ecology, and our publishing business becomes a model for other parts of the machine to reference. So I think it's something worthy. more than just books, the processes we model. I really take a lot of inspiration from the fellow publishers here when you do that well. Yeah.
Sí, creo que bueno, vamos abriendo, se abre el panorama y bueno,
I think that
tenemos
we are
muchas cosas que nos hacen diferentes porque
zooming,
finalmente
we
los
are
contextos de
enhancing
cada uno de
our
los países, de
views,
cada una
and
de las regiones son muy diferentes.
we see
Pero
how
al final creo que una
different
de las
our
cosas
context
en que hemos
can be.
coincidido,
But
digo,
one
hemos
of the
coincidido
things
porque, por ejemplo, desde
we
México
all
la cartonera siempre
agree
pensamos que una de las
is as
cosas es la
follows. Well,
formación de comunidad
I
y
say that
colectividad.
we all agree
Y eso,
because in
y
Mexico, in La
justamente, bueno, también lo pensaba
Cartonera,
Kikuyu, y como lo había dicho también en algún momento
collectivity
dado con
is
Tonatiuh, que
of
se supone que no ya
the
estar
utmost
aquí,
importance.
pero el
And
libro
as
finalmente es una
our
excusa, el
colleague
libro como una
who's
excusa.
absent,
Entonces,
we
contactar con
use
nosotros,
the
comunicar con
books as
nosotros
a
nos permite,
pretext.
aún viviendo
So reaching out
pues
to
en un
others
colonialismo, que no
allows
podemos
us
evitar, porque
to
finalmente
live
está muy
in a
impregnado en las
new
sociedades en las que
way of
vivimos,
colonialism.
sin
Is
modificar
true
en nuestras
because it's
prácticas editoriales,
embedded in the
para entonces
countries we
hacer que el
live
libro,
in.
pues el libro, como bien, otra
But
vez, ¿no? O sea,
at the
que el libro
same
sea una
time,
excusa
we
y en
can
todo
use
caso
the books
podamos
as
comunicarnos con
pretext
nosotros en esa cuestión de la
to
comunidad.
communicate
Bueno, yo quisiera, ya casi vamos a terminar, no sé si
within the
pudiéramos,
community. And I
tenemos algunos
think that
minutos, si
we
alguien de los que
should
está presente
bring
hace una pregunta corta y
this
quiere la conteste, y si
round
no,
of
pues vamos
questions to a
cerrando, ¿no?
close. I
Entonces,
don't know if
porque veo que hay
somebody would
varios que
like
se
to raise a
conectaron.
question. I
No sé
know
si alguien
that
quiera decir algo y si
people
no,
are
pues
getting connected. I don't know
hacemos
if you will
una vuelta
like
de cierre.
to add something, and otherwise we are going
Narcisa,
to
¿quiere decir algo más?
close this
Digo, hay
round
muchas
of
cosas para
questions. I
reflexionar, ¿no?
think you don't dare to
Yo
uh,
diría que,
ask.
pues
Well,
finalmente
I
nos hemos
know that
planteado
there
desde las
are
diferentes prácticas editoriales,
many
pues
um,
también esas ideas,
aspects
y
to
ella
reflect
insisto en
on.
ello, ¿no? De
And I know
comunidad,
that
comunalidad,
publishers insist
colectividad,
on
y
collectivity,
yo una pregunta que lanzaría, y
community,
no para
and I
contestar
would
ahora,
like to
es
launch
justamente
a
si
question
podemos
not to be
hacer
replied
convivir estas
right
cuestiones de
now,
colectividad,
but if we could
comunalidad,
combine
con las ideas que
the
nos impregnan de pronto, ¿no?
community,
Y creo, por lo que me parece, por lo que
collectivity
hemos hablado,
aspects
y por lo que nos han
within
contado, pues
this
pareciera ser que sí,
colonialism.
¿no? Eh,
As far as
y
we have
ser
heard,
entonces, de
it
alguna
could
manera
be
y de muchas
possible.
maneras, siendo
And
libres. Y
so
otra
we
vez voy a lo que decía
could
al
be
principio, ¿no? Hay
free
quienes cuestionan que,
to some
por lo menos
extent.
algunos pensadores
At
aquí
the same
mexicanos
time,
cuestionan
some Mexican
que no fuimos
thinkers
colonizados, o más bien decir
claim that we
colonizados
were not
porque adaptamos, o
colonized
sea, porque conscientemente
because we
adaptamos algunas
consciously
cuestiones
adopted some points
e ideas que venían
and
desde
some
Europa. Entonces, que no
ideas
lo que hicimos, todo ese concepto de los derechos
which
humanos,
came
pues
from
se fue
Europe.
reconstruyendo,
All
por ejemplo,
these
aquí
matters
en México, en
related
Chiapas, ¿no? Con las
to
mujeres zapatistas,
um,
cómo se adoptaron, cómo al final de cuentas lo tomas para
feminism
responder
and
a una
that
realidad que te permite romper con ese
separatist
colonialismo y entonces
women
tienes
adopted.
esas dos cosas,
Uh,
como decían hace rato,
this
hasta cierto punto
was a means
contradiciéndose, ¿no? Pero al
to
mismo tiempo
break up with
comunicándose. Entonces, habrá que romper con el colonialismo, sí,
colonialism, and
pero
it's true
también
that
desde las
will
prácticas
have to end up
comunitarias,
with
desde las prácticas
colonialism,
colectivas,
but
para poder
we
seguir,
will
¿no? Para
succeed
poder seguirles, aun cuando también
through
a
communities,
veces ese concepto de
through
libertad lo cuestionan porque
collective
creen que también es
practices,
un
and
concepto impuesto, pero
sometimes
también habría que preguntarnos, ¿no?
people
¿Cómo queremos ser libres? ¿Cómo
challenge
queremos ser
this
libres
point
desde lo
related to
pluralista, desde nuestras prácticas editoriales?
collectivity because it's something
Que
imposed.
deben ser, y me gustó mucho
So
esto, ¿no? De que deben tomar al libro como
I
excusa.
think that we have to
Entonces, no sé si
use
quieran
this book
cerrar con alguna
as an
idea cada uno de
excuse.
ustedes.
And I
No sé
don't
quién
know
quiera
if you would
comenzar
like
para ir
to
cerrando o
conclude
diría un minuto para ir cerrando cada uno de
by
ustedes.
raising a
¿Quién
question,
quiere
a
comenzar ahora sí?
comment.
¿Quién quiere decir algo?
Who would like to speak?
Moi, je veux bien.
Yes, I'd be happy to take the floor.
¿Quién sabe? Desde tu
Yes,
Bonjour.
Kenza, go ahead.
Je peux parler en
Please go
français.
ahead. Can I speak in French?
Je peux parler en français.
Oui, oui, Kenza, vas-y, tu peux parler en français.
Yes, Kenza, you
Merci.
can speak in French.
Merci vraiment à tous parce que c'est extrêmement inspirant et ça
Thank
résonne
you
beaucoup avec
so
le
much.
contexte que
It's
vous avez
very,
dit sur la
very
question
inspiring. It
d'un
resonates a
héritage
lot with
colonial
my
sur le
context
choix de
in
l'avant.
Morocco. When you
Avec
talk
cette
about
construire le lien avec
when it comes to choosing the language, the link with the communities, with whom you create bridges, and it's been very inspiring. When I'm having discussions with, for example, the readers, it's to try to remind them a few things. The book is not only a mere object of consumption, it's also a right, and that mastering this written language and also the language. So we have mainly French books in Arab-speaking world. We know this perspective of colonialism. So what we say to our readers is to remind them that it's the language of the colonizing power. But it's also a way to remind that, yes, French here in our context is still the language of national upper class. And it's a way also for people at the local level to work with this language to also really understand that it is a language that can be very discriminating. And we have sometimes people saying, yes, but book is outdated. Today we're living in a very technological world and so on. So what we say is that no, because today people who have big careers are people who are very literate. They understand books. And it's not it's not by you using a camera or a computer that we would necessarily succeed, because everything is in the book, the basics of language. So for me, it's interesting because the book can be a tool of empowerment and independence through this literacy. And I think it's very important to manage to take down these arguments of oppression, of colonialism when it comes to using a book. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kerensa. I don't know if somebody would like to intervene, because we only have some minutes left. Somebody of the participants at the round table, or our hosts, so some of our guests, well, everyone was invited to this round table. If it's not the case, and in order to conclude this discussion on the freedom to publish across the different countries, especially from one side to the other side of the planet, allows us to have different answers. We have some points in common, but others are very different because of our socioeconomic contexts. And we also have different stories and narratives. And beyond raising some questions related to the freedom of publishing and the censorship, we should also reflect on the fact that we are all independent publishers, at least I think so, and we should reflect on our position on this publishing world that is part of biodiversity. We like mentioning the sentence that says that we should take books as an excuse, desacralize them, and tell what we have forgotten, remake this book in different ways. Although it seems to be a traditional book. It has the same format or the same layout. And another important point is that we will achieve all this by raising different questions and staying as we are. We are independent publishers and being what we would like to be. And with that, I bring the meeting to a close. I would like to thank the Cantala Press, Kikuyo publishers, Natalia and Daniel, to Kage from Ethos Books in Singapore, to Saed from Folio Books, and Camille and Laurence, because they put us in contact so that we could attend this meeting. And of course, this event called Babelica, which is organized by the International Alliance of Independent Publishers. It was a pleasure to be with you all. I hope we stay in touch because there are so many important topics to reflect on. I don't know if I have introduced myself. I'm Nayeli Sanchez from La Cartonera in Mexico, and I invite you to follow all these Babelica related events. And I invite you to contribute to biodiversity. Thank you very much for being with us. It was a real pleasure to listen to you, to ask you some questions, which allowed us to keep on raising some questions. Thank you very much.